Hey, what's up, guys? It's Jace, and welcome to another exciting episode of the ELAV8 podcast. Today, it's Sam and I solo discussing the de-dollarization of the global economy, what's shifting the world away from the US dollar being the global reserve currency, and the impact that could have on our future. All oil is basically priced in dollars, right? Well, something major, I'm talking massively, happened yesterday. Do you know what it was? Saudi Arabia basically came out and said, you know what? Our long-standing history, our contract, the price of oil in US dollars, we're not going to renew that. So as of today, right, Saudi Arabia has the ability to price oil in any currency they want.
The problem that you're going to see is when the world's most stable currency becomes unstable, then all of the other currencies that are sort of pegged to that value are going to go crazy too.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, and people of the ELAV8 podcast, welcome back to another exciting episode. You know, Sam and I are excited to be here. It's just Sam and I today, no guests, because it's time to circle the wagon on some of our favorite topics. Sam, how you doing?
I'm good, man. However, as we just talked before this, you said you've been saving up ammunition for this, so let's just get to it, man. You drive. I'm excited. I'm a bit afraid, but let's start throwing it down, man.
Okay, so before we begin, today's podcast, we'll probably drift in several different directions, but we're going to start with the global economy. So if it's not your thing, it's not. It's time for you to be like,
it should be your thing.
Yeah.
It's not good.
It should be.
Spoiler alert, not good.
It's not good. It should be your thing. And hey, I'm trying to give you guys some like exit room here. This is not a Final Cut Pro podcast. This is not a technology podcast. We could touch on those things, but we're starting with BRICS. That's where we're going.
Okay. All right. That's surprising, actually. So you drive, Jace.
Okay. So Sam, how much do you know about BRICS? Like, let's start with that.
Well,
I already know. I know the answer.
I have family members who used to be Masons.
Oh wow.
No, but that actually, so you think from the conspiracy level, but I was actually making a joke as if they were bricklayers. So although I think my grandfather might have been a Mason, but I don't know much about it.
My uncle is a Mason, so I'm with you.
All right.
Yeah.
So we'll do a secret handshake later, but in terms of BRICS, in all honesty, what I know is that it is Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa were the founding nations to create an alternative currency versus the American dollar. And they have now been accumulating massive amounts of gold. There are bizarre... they can't seem to figure out exactly how this thing's actually going to work, but I have a feeling Jace might have some information regarding that. And overall, they are challenging the American dollar's worldwide power as a reserve currency.
You know what? If I had enough headroom, I would stand up and give you a standing ovation. That was actually very succinct, very good. And you know what? I already knew you knew what it was, so that was mainly for everybody else. So what I want to talk about specifically today, right, chiming on the de-dollarization of, what's happening across the global economy, is like the biggest thing you touched on is that all those countries are trying to basically say, you know what, we're done with the US dollar. And where does this like mostly affect like the global economy? It's oil, right? All oil is basically priced in dollars, right? Well, something major, I'm talking massively, happened yesterday. Do you know what it was?
No.
Okay, so as of recording this podcast, all right, it's June 13th. Well, June 12th, Saudi Arabia basically came out and said, you know what? Our long-standing history, our contract, the price of oil in US dollars, we're not going to renew that. So as of today, right, Saudi Arabia has the ability to price oil in any currency they want, okay, including Bitcoin. And why does that matter? Well, it matters because Saudi Arabia has just recently joined BRICS, okay? They just signed on, okay? So you named the countries earlier that started it, right? You said Russia and China in particular. Russia is the largest energy exporter on the planet. China is the second largest economy. So in addition to those two countries that we just talked about, now are adding in Saudi Arabia, right? And they're going to change their oil from US dollars to whatever they want, most likely the yuan. What do you think is going to happen?
It probably will not be great for the value of the US dollar.
It will not be great for the US dollar. It's bad.
All right. Well,
I don't know why I'm laughing. It's terrible.
let's put
Yeah.
this in perspective. So when we say bad, how bad?
Okay. Well, so what happens, right, whenever the US dollar is the global reserve currency, right? They can get away with it. They being, essentially, I don't want to use the word they. I'll be more specific, right? The Federal Reserve can essentially loan the United States government as much money as they want, meaning they can print as much money as they want, meaning they can spend it on whatever they want, right? Because that dollar has value and it's backed by the oil industry. It's why it's, lovingly called the petrodollar, right? Well, if the petrodollar disappears, right? Because a lot of people think that, the dollar's backed by nothing. And to a degree, they're right? Because it's no longer backed by gold. It is, in a weird way, backed by the economy of oil, right? And that commoditization of oil. Well, if you take the backing away from the US dollar, it's literally now worth nothing, which means that everything that is dependent on the US dollar, mainly the stock market, the pricing of assets and securities is now going to be in just disarray. And if you look at companies that are dependent on oil and how they're priced using the US dollar and the stock market, I mean, I can see a major reorganization of all these asset managers and how they're prioritizing their trading strategies and shifting away from US markets and probably entering more into the Chinese market.
Well, here's a question. So, we say they're entering into the Chinese market, and this is maybe where would like to be educated, because everything I'm reading these days is that the Chinese market is really no better than the American market at the moment.
Yeah, but this is like their Uno reverse card, right? And I know exactly what you're talking about, so let's be specific. Mainly, like there was this major firm that everybody heard about in the U.S. news, and they're propagating it pretty heavily, which is Evergrande, right? Evergrande, and how it was defaulting on all their loans, and that essentially is the real estate and economy within China. And if that defaults, like the whole house of cards comes down. And the reason why I'm citing the Uno reverse card is literally that's what the United States is able to do right now. We're able to be like, oh, all these things are going, not so well for us. We'll just print more money because it's backed by oil. Now, if you take away the backing of oil, the petrodollar, like we just talked about, and now you give the Uno reverse card to China, they now have the same exact ability to do what the US was doing, and they can essentially be like, yeah, we're just going to print more money and we're going to pass that debt on to our citizens. They now can do that.
So let's play this out, right? Because the truth of the matter is, what I'm not convinced is that look, we're very clearly in. I mean, if you were looking at the sides of World War III, right? You have the U.S. and NATO on one side, essentially, and you have not necessarily the BRICS nations, because countries like India and I think Saudi Arabia are definitely playing both sides. I mean, Saudi Arabia is as likely to sign a peace treaty with Israel as they are to go sell things in yuan. So the reality is they're working for the Saudi Arabian interests, and my guess is they're interested in not switching over to BRICS. They are probably going to play both sides and sell in dollars, in yuan, in Bitcoin, in whatever benefits them to collect as much money as possible. So, and if you look at the worldwide debt of all the nations, which would be truly terrifying if you actually go do this, but you can, the central banks list it. China's not really in a much better position than the US. They also have an aging population. They have a disastrous manufacturing economy at the moment because everyone's cutting spending, and they are the people responsible for putting out all of the world's crap that no one should be buying in the first place. But they can't sell it. That's the problem. They have a deflationary economy because they literally cannot sell all the stuff they're making anymore, and no one around the globe is buying it. And a lot of the manufacturing is diversifying away from them because everybody's terrified of China. So you have this weird situation where there are no good guys, there are no winners, but it feels like a giant game of hot potato. Um, and there's new currencies, right? But there's not really a currency that anyone's excited about. No one can tell you how to like buy things when it comes to BRICS currency. In fact, Bitcoin is a far more stable currency than BRICS appears to be at the moment. So my simple question to you, Jace, is I don't think I don't feel like anything is good for the US economy, and I think that is we're on the precipice of a crash. I guess what I would simply say is it seems like everyone else is screwed too.
Yes and no, but it's like who's going to be screwed the most,
Yeah.
right? I think that's the game that they're playing at the moment, right? We don't have to win, right?
Yeah.
This is what, countries' mentalities are. It's like we don't have to win, but they have to lose more than us. I think that's the type of crash we're going into. Because if you go back into 2008, there wasn't a winner anywhere in terms of, any country. Like Greece defaulted on their debt, right? It was crazy, and everyone felt the pain of that. Well, I genuinely believe something akin to the 2008 crash is coming. And look, we have to flush out all the old debt and we have to establish a new global reserve currency. And this is my moment, my soapbox moment for the podcast, and I'll let it go. I'll make it fleeting. That's why I believe so much in Bitcoin, and that's why I think Saudi Arabia specifically is telegraphing to the world that Bitcoin's not off the table. They specifically call out in the press release that Bitcoin could in fact be the pricing asset for oil moving forward.
So let's game this out, Jace. All right. So this is happening in real time. How prepared do you think the average American is right now?
Not even remotely. And by the way, there's no judgment on this, right? Like, and to be fair, it's our education system's fault, right? Because why would, when we were growing up, right? Let's just be really honest with ourselves, okay? Why would our teachers know to teach us that, oh, hey, inflation is the silent tax that's going to affect you your entire life? They believed that the US dollar was always going to be the center of the world. They had no other reason not to believe that. And I would argue the presidential administrations that we grew up under, right? The Bushes, the Clintons, the Obamas, fast forward to now, they had no understanding and belief that the US dollar wouldn't be the global reserve currency. So in a weird way, everybody got caught with their pants down, right? Everyone did. So imagine, being an average American and not having any savings, credit card debt's at an all-time high. It's greatly surpassed savings, right? There is no possible reality that the average person can win in this situation.
Okay. So if we know that, and we know most of the other countries are are very dependent currently on, like, there's the American dollar, right? And then if you look at the danger to everyone else's currency, well, everyone else's currency is far less stable than the American dollar, right? So
Right.
if there's a problem with the dollar, and we saw this, we've been seeing this the last few years, which is if there's a problem with the dollar, then the euro is a disaster, right? And then the yen is like, banana republic. So the problem that you're going to see is when the world's most stable currency becomes unstable, then all of the other currencies that are sort of pegged to that value are going to go crazy too. And then you're going to enter this weird, are you in the financial system? Are you not in the financial system, which is crypto? Then there's commodities that you start looking at, and it's people like trying to hide wealth and value under rocks, while absolute insanity takes place.
Yeah, man, this is like Miramar, Germany, at the moment, right? Like people forget, because World War II obviously kind of glosses over, the rise and fall of what Germany was,
Yeah, but
before World War II.
our political system is way more stable than theirs.
Fair enough. Well, wait, actually, wait, no, you got me. I want to admit you got me. I thought about that. I was like, wait, no, no, it's definitely not. Yeah. Oh, touche. Touche, you got
In
me.
fact, if we look back into what
Wow.
happened there, you had a similar situation. I believe actually Antifa originated as in Nazi, they fought the Nazis in as the sort of socialist side, even though the Hitler was part of the Socialist Party, but they were anyways, how you want to break it down. But there was two dueling sides essentially, and in a lot of ways, if you look at the way this is shaping up now, you have the militant, right side of the country versus the militant left side of the country, and people in the middle being like, what is going on here? These people are insane.
Yeah, I mean, it's really funny how history repeats itself, right? Because like what's happening is cyclical, right? Whenever great division happens in society, it's normally blamed on immigrants
Mhm.
and poor people, right? Like usually that's what happens. Is like those are the
Easy
two like
targets,
stick.
because they don't speak the language.
Yeah. Yeah. But like that's what's happening right now, right? One like two of the biggest issues right now on the ballot, right, going into the November elections is going to be the border, right? You hear about it nonstop. And not just in this country, by the way. And you surfaced how there's a lot of similarities, from this country globally, right? Immigration is probably the biggest number one issue on the ballot, and it's what you see on the news because it's what's going to drive conservatism and that party forward, I think, in the next election cycle.
Well, otherwise they'd have to deal with honesty, and nobody wants to do that.
You know what's funny, right? And we've talked about this a lot, right? Nobody talks about inflation in a practical way, right? And once again, this isn't political. This isn't me choosing sides. This is just like raw honesty. And you know this because we've talked about it ad nauseum. The creature from Jekyll Island is that inflation wasn't born out of the Biden administration. It was born out of the 2008 financial crisis, and we just never turned the printer off. Every president, from Bush forward had the opportunity to be like, you know what, we're going to stop printing money. And they just
Well,
chose not to do
I
it.
mean, if you really want to go down this road, the inflation was born when the Titanic sank. Um, because on the
Oh, yeah,
Titanic
please.
were the opponents to the Federal Reserve, and when the
You know what? Yeah, no, sorry. I just keep going. I'm not going to interrupt. I want people to know this story. It's so good.
so feel free to fact check me. But the opponents to the financial reserve were bizarrely happened to be all on the Titanic for the most part. And when that sank, shortly thereafter, the Federal Reserve Act was passed. Central banks were brought forth into this country. And then fast forward to basically Nixon taking us off the gold standard. And at which point, you know, we started from something that had a gold backed currency that was based on at least something to a central bank based currency that still kind of was on gold, but allowed a external entity to start printing uh, currency for the sake of the government so the government could fund its projects, right? So unfortunately, when in a sense, and most people don't know this, the way that this actually works is um, the government says, I don't want to raise taxes. So how do I not raise taxes? Because people are going to be mad. Oh, we could print more money, right? So what do? They go walk over to the central bank and they say, hey, central bank, can we have some money? And the central bank's like, sure. And so they're going to, what do we have as collateral? And so essentially, the government creates a bond. And they're going to say, here's a bond that says we're going to go pay you back this money. Here, central bank. And then the central bank says, well, thank you for this bond because this is worth value. But they're going to finance their bonds with future bonds. So if you wanted to talk really about a Ponzi scheme, it's two entities handing IOUs back and forth to each other and then using that as justification to print more money, all so they can avoid telling the American populace that they don't want to raise taxes. And so this is how they tax you, by funding IOUs without you knowing it. And then your prices go up. But this is why gold is the highest performing asset over the last little while, because when you track purchase power versus gold, which stays what it's always been, it goes up because the IOUs have been going up all of this time.
Dude, like what a great explanation. Um, so I want to ask you two questions because you're on fire right now. All right, I want you to explain why the name Federal Reserve is the biggest scam in history. Just the name of it.
Well,
Why is that a scam?
well, because the Federal Reserve is not owned by the U.S. government; it's a private company. So,
No way.
but yet it has federal in the name, but there's nothing federal about it, nor is it a reserve. So it's actually none of what's going on is in any way. It's actually a central bank, and if you want to go into fractional reserve banking, for those of you don't listen to this at your own risk. Federal
It's
Reserve
about to get dark.
Federal Reserve banks believe in something called fractional reserve banking. And that means that you can loan out for every dollar you bring in. And this is where those IOUs come in. So you can, for every IOU or asset that you mark down as an asset, this is very important. For every asset you bring in or every deposit, back in the old days, people would bring in deposits. And then what banks realized when people would bring in their deposits is very rarely do people need to take out all of their money at any one given time. So they would run the numbers for the amount of money they needed to have in place. And then they would lend out whatever money people didn't need to others and charge interest on it. And over time, that percentage has gone further and further down over the years. But here's what's really banana republican crazy about this and scary is those IOUs I was telling you about earlier. Those IOUs are being classified by the central bank as assets. So every time that bond comes in from the US government, it's classified as an asset, which means for every dollar in assets the central bank brings in, they can loan out $10 to other banks. So they never bring in any money. They bring in IOUs, and then their fractional reserve, the reserve, is the government's fake bond IOUs that they then loan out to other banks, interest rates at $10 for every dollar they loan out. So they're loaning out money on fictional assets and IOUs that the government is setting. And then the flip side is the government is then putting those fake assets out on the money they're getting from the Federal Reserve, the checks that they're getting from the Federal Reserve in return for the checks, the money that's being printed, that then filters its way back into the banks, who then pay interest to the central bank. So it's all created out of nothing, and it perpetuates out of nothing, and then someday the music stops.
So question: the music stops, right? This is my second question, by the way. I said I was going to ask you two. Can you tell me what FDIC is?
So the FDIC is basically the government body that ensures that money up to a certain amount, which I think is like 250,000 now, gets paid out in the event there's a run on the bank or Silicon Valley Bank happens and something happens. Your money is insured by the federal government, where they're going to pay it out so that you don't have to worry and you can have faith in the bank if you have under $250,000 stored in assets in the bank system.
So this is I guess a third question. So I'm going to call it 2A. All right, it's a 2A because it's relevant to the FDIC, right? So most people hear that, right, and they feel good about it, right? They're like, wow, that's great, like I'm protected. And people have this propaganda that's been placed upon them to believe that, hey, having my money insured is a good thing. But my question for you, Sam, is it ultimately a good thing? Because keep in mind, you just said something that was very revealing. You said that essentially the Fed would back up that money. They would insure it, like a federal
they'll
agency,
print
FDIC would insure
the money, which will devalue the currency. There's not actually that money sitting in the bank waiting to be paid for you. It's going to get printed, which is then going to devalue the currency in process proportionally to how much they have to give out. So this can become a feeding frenzy in terms of like, oh, there's no money there. They have to pay out all these monies. All these bank failed. So then they have to devalue their currency by printing new money for every dollar they give out in FDIC money.
So, but something you didn't say when you told that whole explanation, you didn't say that the bank that failed was responsible for paying that money back, correct?
No, the government is.
It is the FDIC.
So the government will then
All
have
right.
to go to the central bank for more IOUs to
Mhm.
print the money to then devalue the currency to then, so they have to level up this cycle. And actually, the way a lot of this now works is this is why the US and China runs similarly, by the way. They have the People's Bank of China, so it's not like it's better over there. But what happens there, or in any of these countries, now they go to foreign countries and they give out these loans. So if you've ever read like Confessions of an Economic Hitman or something along those lines, they go give bad loans. Or if you look at the Belt and Road Initiative in China, they go give horrific loans to countries that are basically like the worst credit card loans you've ever to create infrastructure projects in those countries to help them level up out of poverty. But what happens is they do a crappy job, they overcharge on it, they give a massive loan to these questionable governments, put these companies deeply in debt. But that debt then comes in to finance a lot of these bonds. So in many cases, these larger empires are feeding on smaller countries' debt in order to stay afloat.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So, question: If the FDIC, right? I'm circling. I'm taking it home. This is like my favorite part of this question, which is if the FDIC is saying, "Hey, banks, if you mess up, we're going to back you up. All right, we're going to print money and bail you out of your problem." Right? Do banks actually have incentives to play it safe anymore? If they
No.
can get away with fractional reserve banking, right, which is somewhere it should be in the neighborhood of 1 to 30. We both know that's not the case anymore. What can they now do if they know that the FDIC is going to bail them out every time their bank fails? Like, what happens in that situation? Is it going to remain 1 to 30?
Well, this is the derivatives market, right? Which is hundreds and hundreds of trillions of dollars that no one wants to talk about. But like, this is where all these investments and investments on top of investments and the mortgage crisis, all of these things happen. These people don't learn because there's no consequences.
There's no consequences. How many people went to jail in the 2008 bank failure?
Probably just the little people who were sued for fraud or whatever it was, you know, for missing out on their mortgage. But certainly nobody who gave them that mortgage or inflicted any of the stuff on them.
Yeah, like the Lehmans and everything. Like a grand total of like
zero.
Like 2 people. It was
Maybe
like
2.
two.
It might have
like
been
2 across the planet.
They had to pretend that somebody
like 2
paid.
people. Yeah, it was crazy.
Dude, it's bonkers.
So 30 minutes in. We got 30 minutes in talking about banking. So this is good. This is good. This is good for us.
I mean, this is the question, though. It's like, I know about this stuff, and I wish I didn't. The same way that I wish I didn't know about servers, but I'm glad that I do. What percentage do you think of the population knows this stuff?
Less than 5%.
Okay. So what do you think the 95% of this country is going to do when it finds out about it?
I mean, there's nothing to be done, right? There's nothing that can be done unless you want to go like biblical on it and go into the French Revolution territory again. You know,
but that wouldn't actually solve
suggesting
anything. That wouldn't, you know, the truth of this, all of these people, you know, it's not, we're all complicit in this system. So I'm not even going to blame our government. You know, it's like, it's just literally, and this has happened before in American history. If you go back, there's been lots of shakeups to the currency. It's not the first time that this has happened. There's lots of them. But I think there'll be a lag, but it may happen all at once. But then there's a lot of people who are, I mean, look, people have been buying golds, you know, in record numbers. They're selling it at Walmart these days. You know, people are going to put their money into assets because you could be mad at the government. You could go try and shoot everybody up, but I don't think that's going to make the problem better. It's not going to create less chaos. So what do you do on a practical level? And also, who even has access to these people? There's no way. They will go to their underground bunkers or whatever they're going to do. So like, that's not, I mean, even if there was a French Revolution, like, what does that even look like in an AI age? I mean, like, please. So the question simply is, what do people do?
I mean, I don't know.
When they're temper tantrum,
ask a lot.
They'll throw a temper tantrum, but what do they do after the temper tantrum?
I mean, look, I'm not here to solve problems today. I'm just here to expose people to what's coming. And I watched a small documentary about Killdozer. Have you ever heard of Killdozer? The
Mm-mm.
man that had like it was like essentially eminent domain to seize the entrance to his property, so he couldn't facilitate his business anymore. I think it was like a repair shop or something, and no longer get customers to his business. And what he did is he strapped steel onto his bulldozer and essentially bulletproofed it and drove the bulldozer into town to all these government buildings that he believed wronged him and tore them down. And unfortunately, I think he was killed or he turned the gun on himself, in the act of protest. But there's this very famous quote was, "I was willing to be reasonable until they forced me to be unreasonable." And essentially is that I could foresee not, the extreme version of that, and I could see people becoming unreasonable, and whatever their definition of unreasonable is, whatever their limit is, I think we're going to quickly find out that people are willing to go to their limit in a very escalated short amount of time.
Well, that'll be weird. Um, but the other thing about it, though, I mean, and I guess the question is there's a lot invested in making sure that damage control happens, right? So people want a solution. They're going to require some sort of solution. I don't think anyone's there, like I said, there'll be a temper tantrum, but in the end, there will have to be some sort of solution that comes out of this because functionally, we all have to live in the world together. So,
Yeah.
what does the system transform into? What does this adapt into, or does it need to adapt into something? Can the lie just perpetuate? Is it in our best interest to perpetuate the lie? I don't know.
Well, I mean, the thing that scares me the most, right, just kind of drifting behind like the core subject matter of today's podcast, but like now shifting into like, small retail businesses, right? What like scares me the most in this new world that I'm kind of proposing with you is that I feel like there's going to be mass consolidation and further consolidation of these major incorporations, right? These major,
Yeah.
not incorporations, corporations, and that like the small mom and pop shops, or that's who's going to be attacked in this. I think that the rich are going to get richer as they always do, and I think like the Black Rocks of the world are just going to find a way to keep making money while we struggle. I mean, that's not a solution in any way, but
Well,
that's what I see happening.
I read something recently about the medieval ages, a modern feudalism is what's happening, right? So Klaus Schwab's
Oh, please, yeah.
the you'll own nothing and like it basically in the future. And when you think about what that really means, it means that there is in the Middle Ages, feudalism was essentially a group of lords owned property, and everyone else basically was a renter on said property and worked for the lords. And if you didn't, you wouldn't be on the property. The lords would kick you out, or things would happen. So that's if you look at what's the world we're entering into, where there's a lot of people discouraging the act of ownership on things by people. So your software you don't own, your house, there's more and more renting happening, things along those happen, like everything has some sort of payment plan associated to it, or micropayment strategy, or when you think about it, what they're teaching people is to not own things. But when you don't own things, does that mean somebody doesn't own it?
Hmm. No, someone definitely owns it. It's just not you.
So what do we all think about that?
I mean, I've been against the subscription model for years. Right? I remember whenever CS6, landed. That's Adobe CS6 for all you graphic editors out there. And then they went to Adobe Cloud. And that was the darkest day for me because I saw the writing on the wall right there. I'm like, oh my God, I'm going to have a subscription for everything. Because we already had our cell phone bills, and I was used to that. We had our gas bill, we had our electricity bill. And it was really easy to understand that that's what was coming for everything. And so like what really frustrates me about this is what you're essentially doing is you're giving an edge to the people that are wealthy. The more money you have, the more edges you're able to secure against your competitors in the marketplace, right? Because if I am able to afford Adobe and their subscription model and have all their editing services, and I'm able to afford OpenAI's premium version and all the other AI tools that can allow me to be a filmmaker, I have
But let's
a
actually
better
be honest,
chance of
though.
being successful.
So here's a question, right? Because you said something interesting there, which is like, that allows me to afford these tools. My simple question is, are these tools truly better?
I mean that's a very nuanced question because there's no incentive for them to be better.
Well, that's sort of, so they're gonna, you're gonna pay for these things no matter what. So do you think you've got a crack team of geniuses trying to iron out every last piece of inefficiency in all of these things? I mean, like, I don't think so. I think these a lot of these tools are tools that are created to validate VC interests, to get massive amounts of VC money, to then go and create the economic model that propels towards further rounds of funding. These things are not designed to be good tools.
Mm-hmm. Well, I guess it gets at the core, right, of passion, right? The team that's working on it, are they passionate, right? If a team's passionate about stuff and they want to make things because they're excited about it, they're not doing it for a paycheck. I could see tools getting better. And look, not to be a fanboy, and I'm gonna
But who are the
shift the
tools
topic to
for
our
if
favorite.
nobody has the money to afford them?
See, that's a gotcha, right? I don't really have an answer to that because that's at the end of the day, like let's say I'm the person that's making Final Cut in just this made up scenario, right? I know that the type of person I am, I'm going to make it because I have to, right? Like I have to satisfy that inner drive to make that software. I don't care if anybody uses it. So I throw the question back at you. It depends on, is passion in software anymore? That's the core question.
I don't think there's passion in software at the high level right now. I mean, like, let's be honest. Like, we looked at the Apple Intelligence announcement. What problems am I going to solve with that announcement in my day to day? I get an AI emoji. Is this the thing? This is the crowning achievement that I'm going to get excited about?
So this goes back to like I'm going to use a one-to-one comparison. This is about Apple Vision Pro for a second, right? Does Apple Vision Pro right now make your life better? Yes or no?
No.
Can you see it in the future and let's say iteration 3 or 4 making your life better?
It would depend on how we would evaluate that statement. I think certainly I could see use cases for the technology that makes things more efficient. And whether you want to experience things that way or not, it would open up certain learning environments and various things where you could potentially leverage this technology into doing more.
Okay. So I'm gonna give you a little nugget of truth about the announcement we saw from Apple. I'm gonna use Apple Vision Pro to do it, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna use that as my one-to-one. Apple Vision Pro, I have one right behind me, and it's one of my favorite pieces of technology I've ever had, right? And it's made me overall more efficient in my life. And the way it's made me more efficient is I'm gonna tell you things I do that don't really matter, but it'll give you like a reference point, which is I hate doing chores. I think anybody that listens to this hates doing chores, right? I hate folding laundry, I hate doing dishes, hate cleaning the house. Whenever I clean and I do chores now, I wear my Apple Vision Pro while I'm doing chores. I'm cooking, I'm doing dishes, I'm doing that. It is the most advanced technological upgrade to my efficiency that's ever been created because I'm able to remain efficient, answering emails, doing all these things while I'm doing the things I don't want to do. Because I now have this new Z index, right? This new way to interoperate within a spatial world with technology. It's awesome. Now, going back, I know, I'm not going to forget. I see your face. Actually, you know what? Go for it. Go for it. I can
Well,
see
let's touch
your
the
pride.
third rail, right? So now,
Okay.
I guess my simple question is, you being able to answer emails while you're doing said chores or some of the things,
Yeah.
is that actually making you more efficient, or is that just technology bleeding further and further into things it didn't used to touch?
I understand your question. And I guess it's a personal boundary issue, right? My personal boundary with work is like, you know me very well. Like, I'm a workaholic.
Yeah.
You ask me all the time, it's like, how do you find the time? It's like, bro, I don't sleep.
Well,
Like, yeah.
Are
So
you? Well, let me
so
ask you. So here's the simple question, because I think it might be different for everybody. My answer might be a little bit different
yeah,
than yours. Um,
fair enough.
do you feel that you are more productive and happier? Like you have a better way of going about your day to day because of it?
Okay. That's a very deep question, not an easy yes or no, right? So I'll just be very honest. I struggle with depression daily, right? So it's a very weighted question to begin with. But if I'm being really honest with myself, it probably overall makes me more depressed, right? If I'm just really, really, really honest with myself, because one, I'm plugged into the matrix that we talk about all the time, right?
Hmm.
More, right? I have less time for myself, and I'm more controlled by the need to be more successful, right? Like I'm letting that dictate my actions. So I'm allowing to be myself to be controlled more. So yeah, I'm probably more depressed. At the same time, because I'm also honest about this, is I'm allowing that to happen because I have this inner drive inside of me that wants to be more successful. If I was just happy and stasis where I'm at, this wouldn't be a problem.
So, because I'll throw something out at you, right? Is for me, the purpose of technology should be so that I don't have to use technology as much. So
Mm-hmm.
efficiency in technology should enable me to do things that used to be hard and have those things take less time.
Oh, yeah, what you just said is so much more healthy, right, than how I use technology, right? Like that's beautiful. What you said, like I should strive to like reaches like your level of zen is what I'm realizing because what I do is I don't let off the gas, right? Like you're saying like okay, technology comes in I can let off the gas a little bit because technology's driving for me a little bit more efficiently. Me, what I do is I push the gas down further. It's like, oh, I can do more. I can go further. I'm stronger, faster, more efficient. Where in reality, I'd probably be way more happy if I adopted your strategy.
Well, it's for me, I guess I aim for a balanced life, right? You know what I did last night? We went out to dinner and I went immediately after to a speakeasy where I there was a live karaoke night below and we just sat down and like listened to a bunch of people with a bunch of drinks and hung out and I worked a full day, but it was great, right? And I wasn't near any
Yeah.
technology nor did I want any, but where the technology could be useful is amplifying that experience for me. But I want technology to get out of the way so I can experience moments more. You know, like for me, technology uh, does not exist to use more technology. I want technology to solve problems for me. So frankly, I can spend more time doing other things that had nothing to do with technology.
Once again, I'm just gonna say way more healthy than how I'm doing it. So like that's great. I'm actually learning from you in real time again. It's happening once again. You already know this, but I consider you not only a friend but a mentor. So I'm just like getting some great mentorship right now. Um, but yeah, man. I mean
Well, I also
bringing
didn't
it
used to
back
be
to the
this way though. So
yeah.
well, I appreciate that first off, but to tie this together, my simple question, right, is like, okay, so let's imagine the worst thing happens, right? This entire absurdity of a financial system goes poof, right? And so you have all of these like stock traders, right, losing their minds because their digital number on a screen went from $1 bajillion to like $20, right? And their entire self worth is caught up in this. But for the average American, this is maybe the end of Fight Club, where it all just poof, and now everyone goes back to zero. I don't know.
hmm hmm I mean, but that debt's still gonna exist on certain
But how is that
systems, right?
enforceable? Debt to who? Because if that currency
Yeah,
changes,
yeah. No, I look. I understand fundamentally what you're saying, right? But or it could just be like the P loans, right? The PPP loans, like nobody paid those back. Like those were forgiven. It's like, oh hey, like here you go. Like and everybody patted themselves on the back, like we saved the country, we ensured like small businesses didn't go out, but like it just created more inflation for
But
everyone.
the
So
inflation
it's
that could
crazy.
end up happening, right, is what you may also see is things like, oh, we've inflated the currency so much that lots of people were able to then pay off their mortgages, right? So now they have their mortgages free and clear because the mortgages won't go up. All kinds of weird stuff could start happening.
Yeah, but like, look, what you just talked about is a world that real-time payments don't exist, right? The reason why that was able to happen is inflation lags. So you and I both know this, right? Inflation, can take 6 to 8 months to follow, right? Whereas when all those rates went to zero and people refinanced and like did exactly what you're saying, the problem with that is inflation hadn't hit yet, right? And I'm going to say something that I said a couple podcasts ago is like in financial history, there's always a couple arrows in the quiver, right? Meaning that the Fed can raise rates, right? They can lower rates, right? There's like flexibility, right? And the way they do that is to control inflation and to control unemployment. Well, here's the problem, right? Unemployment ticking up a little bit, right? It's ticking up a little bit. Inflation still not in check, and rates are already super high. So the Fed can't cut rates. They can't do it. All right, they want to, they can't do it. All right, inflation's still ticking up. Where's the solve here? Where traditionally you could play with one number and be like, we're gonna play with that. That's no longer possible.
This is where, ideally, you might have a technological breakthrough that would allow people to do more with less. And this is where a good use for technology would be, is because when your dollar buys more, you have to get smarter and you have to be able to do more with less. And this is where I think people need to start wrapping their heads around is when your purchasing power gets lower. I mean, it's not like the world changed one day to the next. It's your view of the world through the lens of currency changed. So,
Mm-hmm. Oh,
but
that's beautiful.
but there's still the same amount of shit in the world. You just think you could
So
buy less of it.
So something that I find really interesting, and I actually want your opinion on it. We have I don't think we've talked about this in any previous podcast. Is like things like the cost of a hamburger here in California, right? And I'm not necessarily talking about inflation, but I'm talking about minimum wage going up, right? And look, I don't have any qualms with people making more money. I understand why they need to make more money because we live in an economy that like if you don't make more money, you can't survive. So like I understand that. That's my caveat. But I do want to say is that we're so reactive in a traditional financial mindset that all these businesses and all these mandates from localized governments are going to make reactive decisions relevant to the financial markets. And I don't think it's going to be cohesive amongst everyone. And that's where I think the friction is going to occur. So if we go back to what you're saying, we have the giant reset, right? It would be interesting. I'm not saying it'd be great, but it'd be interesting if it was done at a federal level, right? And it was just like blanket statement across all these micro economies that everyone could compete at the same level, the same starting block. What's going to happen though is that the local economies are going to operate independently and say, we're going to do this. No, over in this state, we're going to do this. And it's going to just lead to like just this. I don't even know the right word. It's going to be utter chaos.
Well, there's a couple things there, right? So let's really break this down too. I mean, people are angry about a $20 an hour minimum wage, but when you really think about $20 an hour, just they're viewing that through the reference of like, oh, I grew up and $7 an hour was a big deal, right? But the thing is, $7 and $20 an hour, $20 is the new $7. And so it going up is still basically these are slave wages for the most part if you live in California. Jace, could you live off $20 an hour in California?
No, absolutely not. And you know that very well.
So
But I mean, but here's the thing: like spending has to match wages, right? And
no,
this is
it
where this
doesn't.
great. Oh, but it has to. Like think about it, right? Like if people aren't spending money, right? Like I'm no longer going to any fast food restaurant. I will not go to
Yeah.
Chick-fil-A. I will not go to McDonald's. I won't go anywhere because the value of the burger no longer meets the cost that it, cost for me to purchase. So my spending in that establishment is going down. And that's universal across everyone within California. People are not going to fast food anymore. So wages went up, all right? Spending's going down. What happens? Right? People get laid off. And this is, I'm glad you brought that up, is like, there's a place called Rubio's. I think you know it. Like, have you heard of Rubio's, the Mexican food restaurant?
Yeah,
They do like
that's
tacos and stuff.
familiar. Yeah. Oh, okay.
They're closing, I think, 60 locations in California because they can't meet demand anymore. They can't meet demand of paying their employees because spending's going down and mainly driven by the minimum wage increase.
Yeah. Well, I mean, let's be honest though. Like, should most of these restaurants exist? Or we're not even
See
calling
that?
them restaurants, right? Like, seriously, go drive around your average like suburb these days, right? And
Mm-hmm.
you go and you drive around and you see a Popeyes, a Chick-fil-A, a Burger King, McDonald's, an Applebee's, Chili's, Olive Garden, just name all of these things. Should any of these things actually be things? Do any of these things like who cares?
Well, I mean, well, then we're going to get into like how we as a country have a problem with food in general,
Well,
right?
we
Like,
probably should because we have a big problem with food. And like this casual, like whether it's fast food, which is just probably the same half-assed burger, because I worked at Chili's and Applebee's or whatever. It's the same burger you're probably getting at Burger King. Just somebody brought it out to you to a table. But it's the same
yeah.
crap that's coming from the same food distributor that is got the same sense from New Jersey baked into it. Did you know most of the McDonald's smell was manufactured in lab in New Jersey? Much like most.
What?
Oh, dude, yeah, it's true. In fact, many of the smells, many of the things you associate in your brain when you walk in. Have you ever noticed every McDonald's smells exactly the same?
Yes.
Do you know why? Because there
I
was the
don't.
McDonald's smell created in a lab in New Jersey. And this smell is placed on all of the products in the distributor. It's not because these things taste the way they taste. It's because the smell is like a perfume they put on the food. And you go in and it's why everything smells the same because it smells the same because there's a perfume they put on it so that it smells like McDonald's and tastes like McDonald's because you associate smell with taste.
I want you to know, Sam, you've greatly upset me just now. You've greatly upset me. I want to have my olfactory senses just bring me back to nostalgia every time I walk in there. And now I'm going to know it's completely arbitrary and just manufactured.
Yes. It's in fact it's not arbitrary. It's manufactured exactly so that it's identical every time you go in there. It's by design.
I'm very, I'm very upset. I'm very, very, very upset right now.
Uh,
I have to research this. Is there a
fa-
documentary or book
Fast Food Nation, I believe, is the book that I read way back when.
Fast Food Nation? Okay. By the way, did you see the Super Size Me director of the
Oh,
documentary and
yeah.
passed away?
Oh, it's terrible. Morgan Spurlock, yeah. I mean, but that was I had a whole thing back in my 20s and I still eat some of the stuff because like if you really think about how your ingredients are truly manufactured in all of these things, I mean, like, let's just say we willfully keep our heads in the sand when it comes to this. And look, I mean, most of the country, right? I mean, you know about the Golden Corral, right?
Oh, dude, I had like 3 or 4 birthdays there. Okay,
Yeah.
like I loved Golden Corral growing up.
But let's just imagine, right? I just refer to it as like America's trough, right? And basically, it's just people coming in to graze, and like there's no quality to the ingredients, and there's a certain amount of like how much can you eat, how much value can you get from eating, versus like I mean, this is probably these priorities are off a little bit. So, but I was raised on this, and with this derailed from the currency, but I guess back to my original point is simply like all of these different restaurants, they're just little decals on a building, right? That have a logo that you associate something in your brain to, but it's the same food distributors, the same corporations, the same things, just delivering these things to you. And they don't really like, there's no difference from one to the next. It's not like they're paying their employees any differently. And it's not like these are mom and pop restaurants that should be in business that you should be paying. So like, the real question is like, Will we miss any of these things? Does the world really need more Taco Bells?
I don't know. According to Demolition Man, yes.
Yeah, they won the fast food wars. Totally. But like, yeah, look, man, it's these are questions we should all be asking ourselves. Like the question is like, what constitutes the society we should be living, and how should we make that up, and what does that mean? And what kind of ingredients should we be putting in our bodies, and things like that, and where did it all come from? I don't know. I don't have the answers, but that's
Do you think Jamie Oliver just like stays up at night and just like curses America and just like, why didn't you like my ideas about food?
who's Jamie Oliver?
Oh, you don't remember the like? I think it was like the Jamie Oliver experience or whatever. There was this British chef that came into all like the elementary schools in America, like elementary and middle schools, and was showing kids how to eat more nutritious. And like my favorite scene that like ever came from that show was he shows how a chicken nugget's made, right?
Oh,
Like the right way a chicken nugget's made, and it's one of the most disgusting scenes like ever. You're
but
like,
dude,
man, I'm really,
think about how
yeah,
susceptible we are to that marketing, right? Like I think about this all
oh
the
yeah.
time. When we were growing up, right? Our generation, we think that like we were not susceptible tomorrow. We're smart. We get it. We can get around all that stuff. But like, dude, all of the stuff that I grew up eating, even the fact that we used to eat fast food and we don't anymore. Think about how tricked we were into thinking
Mhm.
that that food at all, like all the food choices that we make, all the drinks that we drink, all of that stuff, we're totally brainwashed.
Dude, you know what's funny is I didn't even want the food. I wanted the toy.
Yeah.
I wanted the Inspector Gadget collection. I wanted to play Monopoly. Like that's why I went to that store.
We could pause right there, man, because like that's like the Monopoly game at McDonald's, right? The only reason you chose McDonald's is because of Ronald McDonald, fucking Grimace, Hamburglar, all of these things versus just some random farmer's market, burger, right?
Hmm.
That's the only reason you chose it, is because of McDonald's marketing. It had nothing to do with anything real, just marketing.
Yeah, man. I mean, I remember the Godzilla movie. They had a special at Taco Bell. Loved Taco Bell for a hot minute because I was like, man, I love the Godzilla movie, and they had some cool toys. You know, it was fun.
So
But hey,
I'll put a pin on this, and then I'm gonna let you take us out because we're coming up at the hour, which is like, if you really think about this, the marketing involved in tricking all of us into thinking the financial system matters is only because we grew up on it. But
mhm.
if you think about it, really, or technology, or a lot of these things, like a lot of people are just being paid to do this and go through the doom scroll, right? Or do various things. They're not really solving problems in society, but we have an economy of a hedge fund economy, right? People who are addicted to living in this idea that like, oh, I need to get derivatives or do this various thing, and these artificial creations, right? In this whole Ponzi scheme house of cards. But like the real thing is like, if it all went away tomorrow, you'd still have the food in your refrigerator. You're just numbers on the screen. Your imaginary numbers on the screen would be different.
Hmm. Hmm. I mean, it's true. As long as I can buy my groceries, Sam. Like, how do I get my food?
Well,
And you always talk about when you start farms.
yeah, but that's like, if our farming and the way that our farming worked was different, you could just walk down the street and get it out of a house. It's just it's pulling stuff out of the ground. It's coming off trees. Like this stuff, we know how to do this, or some people, you and I don't know how to do this, but other people know how to do this.
Hey, man, I'll just tap into my Texas upbringing. I'll go
Yeah.
back to being a farmer. I know a little bit. I got a green thumb, Sam.
I think the only reason you're not is because we are all addicted to the financial system.
Well, that and I bought the Hollywood Lie, but that's for another for another
We do
podcast,
the next
right?
one. Yeah. Talk about something that is, I bought the Hollywood lie too, man.
I know we talk about it religiously. You were the only smart one though to leave, so congrats to that. I'm still like dumbass still living here, so
Well,
love that.
I mean, all right. Well, so we talked about a lot. I don't know that we necessarily came up with a solution, but there's stuff that's clearly getting ready to happen, and things are going to start changing in some way.
Mhm.
So, Jace, if you're talking to the people out there, what do you think they should do?
I mean, I've been a proponent of Bitcoin from day one. Everybody thought I was, a crazy computer nerd that was talking about this made up internet money, which is my response to you. If you're listening to this, we just proved that money is made up. U.S. dollars are made up. The yen is made up. The yuan is made up. Rubles are made up. Any currency you can think of is
BRICS,
made up.
totally made up.
Include BRICS, totally made up. The value of gold is made up. It's just finite, right? So if all the things that I just told you are made up, okay? What's the difference between having a transparent ledger where you know where every single Bitcoin is, right? You know where it is. No more can be created. It's finite. And you know what? If enough of us believe that it has value, it will have value because that's all money is. It's a belief system. So that's what I'm leaving our viewers with is that I believe in Bitcoin. It is my hedge against all the failures I see coming, and I highly encourage you to research it.
And just something that you've said before, you told me this, which it really drives the value of Bitcoin home, is how many millionaires are there in America, Chase?
I think it's 56. I think there's 56 million. I
50.
know it's over 50.
How many Bitcoin will there ever be in the world?
21 million.
Scarcity is the only thing that has value in this world.
Not every single millionaire in the United States can own just one Bitcoin. If they all tried, they couldn't. They couldn't do it. That's why I believe in Bitcoin. And by the way, you can buy a fraction of Bitcoin. Not a lot of people know that. It's like, Jace, I can't afford a full Bitcoin. Well, buy 0.05 of a Bitcoin, 0.001. It doesn't matter. Just get off zero. Get off zero. Don't have zero Bitcoin. Have Bitcoin.
And I would just simply say, don't only have Bitcoin, hedge, have dollars, have Bitcoin, have gold, have all of the different things that you may think may have value in a society and diversify your assets around that. Don't put all your eggs in one basket when, frankly, nobody knows which basket is going to be the one that has value for the next couple
All
of
right, I'm
years.
going to buy some ammo. I'm just going to buy ammo.
Well,
That's what I heard.
that will have value,
Buy some
actually.
ammo.
That probably will be a commodity that has a lot of value. So, this is,
Yeah.
all right. Well, this was an uplifting one, Jace.
Oh, yeah. We laughed. We smiled. We enjoyed each other's company like always.
That's it. Well, so there you go. And hopefully, for those of you listening out there, like I actually don't think it's all doom and gloom. I think what is happening is we're going through a transition, and over time, when people see the truth of something and they see how things really actually are, the only thing that can happen is something positive. It may feel negative at first as you lose your addiction to the lie, but over time, acknowledging, accepting, and embracing the truth is in everyone's best interest.
And with that, we're going to call an end to this podcast. Everyone, thank you so much for listening to the ELAV8 podcast, and we'll catch you here next time. Peace.